Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
A former Chula Vista City Council member has pleaded guilty to felony charges. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and this comes less than 2 weeks after Andrea Cardenas resigned from council. KPBS South Bay reporter Corey Suzuki has more on the plea change and what this means for next week's election.
Maya, this is a really big deal. Until just last week, Andrea Cardenas was a sitting city council member in the county's second largest city. Back in the fall, she and her brother, political consultant Jesus Cardenas, both pleaded not guilty to a number of felony charges, including grand theft, fraud, and money laundering. Those were all related to thousands of dollars of federal and state pandemic emergency funds. But now, Cardenas and her brother have changed their pleas. This morning, both of them pleaded guilty to 2 counts of grand theft against the Federal Small Business Association and the California Employment Development Department. A judge is scheduled to decide Cardenas' sentence later this year.
Thanks, Corey. But what does this mean for the upcoming primary elections?
Yeah, this news definitely adds some more confusion to the election next week. Cardenas was set to run for re-election until she abruptly resigned last week. But her name is still on the ballot for the primary, which means residents can still vote for her. And Axios San Diego actually reported that Cardenas' attorney said she might still try to rejoin the city council if she somehow won the election. So this news about her pleading guilty has just made this election more uncertain. In the newsroom, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
I'm Ariella Scalise, and coming up tonight, temperatures dropping to the 50s. Could see a little bit of patchy fog developing late, and then a cooling trend moving into the weekend with heavy rain, mountain snow, windy conditions. But we will dry out as we head into next week. A closer look at the forecast is just ahead.
The San Diego County Board of Supervisors has approved a long-term plan to address migrant services. But KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says there is no funding to put that plan into action.
Most of the asylum seekers and other migrants Border Patrol agents drop off in the streets of San Diego don't plan to stay here. In fact, more than 95% of them move on to other cities within 24 to 72 hours. And with that in mind, county leaders believe that the best long-term solution to addressing migrant drop-offs is a migrant transfer site and shelter, a permanent place where people can stay for a few days while finalizing their travel plans. Chief Administrative Officer Sarah Agassi described the idea like this.
Space to accommodate the flow of 500 individuals or families per day in a location close to the U.S.-Mexico border or central San Diego, with the ability to easily connect to transportation hubs.
Now, the plan does not identify a specific funding source, and local officials are not optimistic that they'll find one anytime soon. Still, County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer says it's helpful to have a plan, even if there's no funding behind it right now.
I personally don't have a lot of hope, given what's happening in Congress, that our request is going to be heeded. But I think it's incumbent upon us to have done the work and done our due diligence and put forward a plan.
The supervisors were discussing this plan just days after the county shut down its temporary migrant welcome center due to lack of funding. Migrant advocates told KPBS that county leaders should have had this conversation months ago. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
When the county's Welcome Center abruptly closed last week, there was no transition plan in place. Coming up, what that's meant for organizations working to help migrants. The shutdown countdown clock is ticking once again. Congress faces the first of 2 government funding deadlines in just 2 days, and that could make things confusing for households about what programs might be impacted. Karen Kafa is in Washington to sort it out.
Congressional leaders racing the clock again.
I think it's pretty safe to say we all agree we need to avoid a government shutdown.
We made it so clear
that we can have the shutdown because it hurts so many people in so many different ways, even for a short period of time.
And households wondering how to prepare. In January, lawmakers passed another short-term government funding deal with 2 new deadlines on March 1st and March 8th. Without a deal, departments impacted by this week's deadline include transportation, housing and urban development, veterans affairs, agriculture, and energy. Operations critical to public safety would continue during a shutdown, so employees like USDA food inspectors and TSA workers and air traffic controllers would stay on the job, but without pay. The Department of Agriculture says recipients of SNAP food stamp benefits and pregnant women and new moms enrolled in the WIC program would receive March payments. VA policy says veteran health care would not be affected and benefits like housing and pensions would continue. But services like career counseling and the transition assistance program for service members moving into civilian life would not be available. Meanwhile, next week's deadline includes the IRS, potentially scaling back the number of IRS employees on the job as tax filing season approaches its peak. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says it's time for the next generation of leadership. He announced today he plans to step down as the party's leader in the chamber in November, although he will continue to serve in the Senate. He added that the decision was made following the death of his wife's youngest sister in a traffic accident this month. McConnell turned 82 last week. He is the longest-serving party leader in the Senate from either party. Right now, city leaders in Escondido are voting on a new homeless policy. They say the one-size-fits-all approach for housing first has not been effective. The city says it will not support any program that enables drug use or allows for people to live on the streets. Instead, the new policy will place emphasis on substance abuse and mental health resources, as well as crime. Community members came together to talk about the policy last night.
Their response is one really of punitive measures. They're seeing the issue not as an issue of housing, but an issue of crime. And as we said, it's a complicated issue. Certainly there is crime, but housing is what we need to talk about.
The new policy would prioritize crime in specific areas, including Grape Day Park, Grand Avenue near Center City Parkway to Ivy Street, and Valley Parkway. Michigan's primaries brought both President Biden and former President Trump one step closer to a likely rematch in November, but the votes they didn't get sent a message to both candidates. Julia Benbrook breaks down the results.
Trump and Biden secured big wins last night in the Michigan primaries, but the results in this key battleground state carried some warning signs as both candidates eye the general election.
Another commanding Republican primary win for Donald Trump. The former president received roughly 68% of the vote, helping solidify his path to the GOP nomination. Trump is already looking toward the general election.
I can tell you this, November 5th cannot come fast enough because our country's in serious trouble.
But his last remaining major primary opponent, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, received just over a quarter of the vote on Tuesday, indicating a sizable group of Republican voters are either firmly opposed to Trump or still need to be won over.
This has become about one man when it should be about the American people. That's what we're fighting for.
The Michigan primaries also highlighted one of President Joe Biden's vulnerabilities. Even as Biden won more than 80% of the Democratic vote, some Democrats used their ballots as a form of protest against the president's response to the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. More than 100,000 people voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary.
He needs to call for an immediate, permanent ceasefire. And he needs to stop funding the Israeli military's war crimes.
Biden put out a statement celebrating his Michigan victory, but did not mention the protest vote. A senior campaign advisor later sent out a message saying, quote, President Biden shares the goal of many of the folks who voted uncommitted, which is an end to the violence and a just and lasting peace.
Long-shot Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson announced she's back in the race just weeks after suspending her campaign. She made the announcement on social media and cited Biden's vulnerabilities in a matchup with Trump. Reporting at the White House, I'm Julia Benbrook.
And we have more about the upcoming election on our website. The KPBS Voter Hub is where you'll find Q&As with San Diego County candidates, as well as information on how and where you can cast your ballot. Just go to kpbs.org/voterhub.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the Supreme Court agrees to decide whether former President Donald Trump is immune from prosecution. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
It's been less than a week since San Diego County's Migrant Welcome Center closed due to lack of funding, and U.S. border officials have officially dropped off more than 1,000 migrants on the streets of San Diego. KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis says relief organizations are overwhelmed.
We raised these concerns, and unfortunately here we are again.
Paulina Reyes hasn't stopped working since last Thursday.
There is no local or county or federal support.
Reyes is a managing attorney for the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, which is one of the nonprofits, mutual aid organizations, and advocacy groups welcoming migrants at the Iris Avenue Transit Center in San Isidro. And they're all scrambling right now because the Migrant Welcome Center, run by the nonprofit SBCS, closed last week. San Diego County Supervisors had allocated $6 million for the center, and it was supposed to stay open through the end of March, but they ran out of money before the end of February.
As a result, this led to the site's sudden closure without proper notice to on-site partners like ourselves, and without any transition plan in place.
Megan Zavala is a policy analyst with Al Otro Lado. She's among the advocates frustrated by just how quickly the money ran out.
Despite this infusion of $6 million, we have no welcoming infrastructure to show for it.
Customs and Border Protection has been releasing asylum seekers and other migrants into the streets of San Diego since September. When it started, advocates asked county leaders to invest in long-term efforts like physical space to host these services. But that didn't happen, and now the street releases are back, with more than 1,000 dropped off since last Thursday.
At the moment, we are frustrated that the money was spent in the way it was without a lasting infrastructure. We understand that $6 million isn't able to keep us going for many years, but it should be an investment to lay a foundation.
To be fair, more than 81,000 migrants received help through the Migrant Welcome Center while it was open between October and last week, according to SBCS. Kimiko Hirota is a policy advisor at the Women's Refugee Commission. She says even without county funding, welcoming migrants doesn't have to be so chaotic.
The reception of new arrivals doesn't need to be only through a crisis response or emergency response. It works so much better when we're able to work collaboratively and to not try to back away from the work, but instead to lean in.
Hirota says that there are examples of orderly and sustainable migrant welcoming programs right here in San Diego. Jewish Family Services has helped more than 200,000 migrants in the last 5.5 years. CEO Michael Hopkins says the work requires lots of collaboration.
Because this work is bigger than Jewish Family Service or any one organization. It's bigger than the county. It's bigger than the city. It's the state. All partners need to be kind of like have skin in the game and to be doing this work.
Jewish Family Services receives money from the federal government and private donations, but those dollars aren't fully guaranteed for next year. The overall funding picture is likely to remain cloudy. Budget deficits in California could lead to cuts at the state level. And guessing what federal funding will be going forward is next to impossible until the November election. This is why San Diego region needs to develop a long-term plan. So says Kate Clark, a senior director for Jewish Family Services.
We are a border community, we are a border state. Folks are going to be fleeing for protection from all over the world. Our unsheltered service system is broken, our immigration services system is broken.
But as of right now, elected officials in San Diego don't have a plan in place. This week's agenda for the San Diego County Supervisors indicates that they've begun drafting a plan for a, quote, long-term federally funded migrant transfer site, but still no specifics. KPBS reached out to San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and County Supervisor Nora Vargas. Neither responded to a request for an interview. Pedro Rios is another advocate who hasn't stopped working since the Migrant Welcome Center closed.
As members of a governing body,
they should be tuned into all these changes and understand what their roles and responsibilities are, and not just simply say, well, here's $6 million, fix it. That money's bound to run out. Obviously, it ran out faster than what everyone expected it to.
He really hopes that a plan will be coming soon. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
An Alabama Supreme Court ruling on in vitro fertilization is having ramifications here in California. A California woman's last viable embryo is now stuck in Alabama. The court ruled that frozen embryos are children. 2 years ago, Heather Moorer moved to California from Mississippi while she was pregnant with her now 19-month-old son. Before the move, she had been referred to the University of Alabama at Birmingham for fertility treatments, where one of her embryos remains frozen.
I started more medications, more injections, and purchased our ticket, paid for the transfer fees. Everything was in line for this March 20th transfer date. I received a phone call from my doctor, and I could hear the devastation in her voice. And that's when I knew this isn't happening.
Moore says UVA wasn't able to release her embryo to a facility in California. She is waiting to see if Alabama lawmakers can pass legislation to protect IVF patients. Well, Vista is working on a cannabis equity policy. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen says it comes after the City Council reviewed recommendations last night.
In August of 2022, the City Council directed staff to investigate a cannabis equity assessment.
2 years ago, the City of Vista commissioned a cannabis equity assessment to see how cannabis-related industries could be managed equitably, especially for communities harmed by the war on drugs.
Once that report is accepted, to begin to develop the city's equity program.
There are currently 11 dispensaries in Vista, but the city isn't looking to open more. Rather, the report is preparation for when the city considers other types of cannabis businesses, such as lounges and cultivation farms.
Lounges, either close or near, with the same, stipulations as we have.
Looking at city data from 2014 to 2023, the report found that black people were disproportionately arrested for cannabis-related crimes compared to their white counterparts.
So nearly 2 times their representation.
Kyle Tankard is the cannabis policy expert at SCI Consulting Group, which conducted the study. He says going back to 1991, in San Diego County, black people were more than 5 times as likely as whites to be arrested for pot. Latinos were nearly 3 times as likely.
So really what that shows us is this disproportionate arrest rates for these demographic and ethnic groups.
Among the recommendations, Tankard says the city should provide financial support from fee waivers to business grants, and also provide technical support, such as a curriculum for people to learn about the business and the laws and regulations around it. In the report, Tankard also mapped the area where cannabis arrests happened, and a lot of it was in District 1, which is Karina Contreras' district. She says she wasn't surprised by it.
It's also a heavily Latino area. So, we have seen a lot of concerns in District 1 that haven't been addressed. Everything from incomplete infrastructure to now looking at how cannabis social equity really can be implemented in a better way to build community and build more prosperity.
The city attorney's office will now draft a policy for the council to review at a later date. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
San Diego County and UC San Diego Health are joining forces to train 1 million people in hands-only CPR. It's part of the Revive and Survive initiative. KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us why the technique is a lifesaver for people in cardiac arrest.
Push, push, push. The first few minutes after someone has gone into cardiac arrest are the most critical, says County Emergency Medical Services Director Dr. Christy Koenig.
We need to have somebody there to help support the heart until we can get our EMS professionals to the scene to provide a higher level of care. It will increase survival. It can double your survival if you have bystander hands-only CPR on scene immediately.
That was the case for Robert Hoadley, who suffered cardiac arrest in 2011. He credits his coworker for jumping into action and performing CPR for 7 minutes and saving his life.
In your moment of need, that life that is saved might be your own.
San Diego County Fire Director Jeff Collins says bystander CPR is performed less than 50% of the time in San Diego. He hopes this initiative encourages individuals to get hands-only CPR training.
So they can be there for that family member or friend, or they can be there for that stranger that's in need.
The American Heart Association says 9 out of 10 people who experience cardiac arrest die before they reach the hospital.
Brain death starts to occur 4 to 6 minutes after someone experiences a cardiac arrest if CPR is not performed. So we need to get there right away, because no matter how quickly our first responders get there, if they get there and somebody has not had hands-only CPR, their outcome is not going to be as good.
Koenig says hands-only CPR is so easy a child can do it.
You just press hard and press fast with hands only, and you can save a life.
To learn more about the Revive and Survive initiative and where to get free hands-only CPR training, go to revivesurvive.ucsd.edu. Melissa May, KPBS News.
Looking ahead to our weather headlines as we are tracking cooler weather beginning to move on in, and then heads up for strong winds, rain, and heavy mountain snow as we head into the end of the week through the weekend. Drier weather, though, will return as we head into next week. Looking at tonight, Borrego Springs down to 50, Mount Laguna, cool night for you at 38. Some fog moving in, San Diego down to 53, Chula Vista 50, and Oceanside down to 52. High pressure continues around the Four Corners as we head into the day Thursday, still keeping us dry as we head into the end of the week here, but Northern California will be dealing with more rain showers and some of that heavy mountain snow in the northern part of the Sierra throughout the day tomorrow. Some more clouds for Oceanside down to Chula Vista, keeping temperatures into the mid-60s. A little bit more sunshine in San Diego at 65, and plenty of sunshine for you, Borrego Springs at 77, Mount Laguna a cool 46. Looking at the wet weather as it starts to slide a bit farther south into parts of central California as we head into the day Friday, and those windy conditions pick up on top of the heavy mountain snow. Looking at the next couple of days as eventually the rain makes it to the coast. That happens as we head through the day on Saturday, so any outdoor plans this weekend could be impacted with the showers to start the weekend, drying out with some more sunshine on Sunday and as we head into Monday. Looking further inland as those low clouds begin to break for our Thursday, staying mostly cloudy on Friday, and then cooler conditions with some rain to start the weekend. Second half of the weekend still cool, but plenty of sunshine and warming back up as we head into the day on Monday. Looking at the mountains for the next couple of days, breezy conditions by Thursday afternoon and staying pretty windy for Friday with a high of only 44. Temperatures significantly drop this weekend, plus we'll be tracking some snow and very windy weather, and that can make travel difficult for Saturday and Sunday if you're trying to head to the mountains. Cold on Monday, but at least we will be drier. Even some rain and drizzle for the deserts as we head into the start of the weekend. Cooler with sunshine for the second half of the weekend. For KPBS News, I'm Ariella Scalise.
The Academy Awards are on March 10th, and this weekend, Digital Gem Cinema is showing 2 of the Best International Feature Film Oscar nominees, plus another that should have been a contender. KPBS Cinema junkie Beth Accomando has these recommendations for your weekend viewing.
In the teacher's lounge, Carla is a young teacher who seems to have a good rapport with her students. So when one of them is suspected of theft, she tries to clear him. Fueled by idealistic fervor, she challenges the racial stereotypes she feels are in play. But things are not so simple. Her good intentions quickly go awry, stirring the ire of both her students and their parents.
Ich an ihrer Stelle würde dieser Frau kein Wort mehr glauben.
The consequences of her actions shake her to her core. The film suggests that it can be difficult to navigate through our modern world, even when driven by good intentions. Carla's presented as a complex, flawed, naive, and brave person that we can't always figure out. The Teacher's Lounge creates a stress-filled narrative and builds tension in ways that feel like the beats of a horror film. It's grueling, but rewarding. Also nominated for a Best International Feature Film Oscar is Italy's Io Capitano. Being a border city, San Diego is used to immigrant stories. But increasingly, Italy's filmmakers are also drawn to telling stories of the immigrant experience. In this case, it's the story of 2 young boys from Senegal who dream of a better life in Italy. But as with people trying to cross the border from Mexico, the journey can be expensive, difficult, and dangerous. In the case of Io Capitano, it's also a harrowing and heartbreaking journey that tests the courage, strength, and compassion of the boy named Seydou. Although it's a story fueled by hope and resilience on one level, it also reminds us that immigrants like Seydou will still face challenges and danger once they reach another country. But missing from this year's Oscar ranks is The Promised Land, featuring an award-worthy performance by Mads Mikkelsen. Mikkelsen plays Ludwig Kalen, a real soldier who in 1755 arrives on the barren Jutland Heath to cultivate the land in the hopes of finding wealth and honor. But Kalen faces the dual hardships of a harsh land and a cruel neighboring aristocrat who looks down on the former soldier.
Livet er kaos. Nej, krig er kaos. Men vinderen er den, som kan finde ud af at kontrollere kaos.
Fair warning, none of these films offer anything conventionally feel-good, but all three are crafted with such intense care that it's hard to turn away from the screen even when people are at their worst. The Promised Land may deserve the award for displaying the most horrific of human behavior, yet it comes with a measure of revenge. But all three of these remarkable films display passionate and impressive skill from foreign filmmakers. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Some great recommendations there from Beth. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Tomorrow is Leap Day. NPR listeners tell Morning Edition what they're doing with their extra day this year. And KPBS Midday Edition has a wrap-up of arts and culture events happening across the county in the weekend preview. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.